Hello! It seems a long time since I've been here doing this, but I'm back now and I have nearly got my voice back after my disastrous week recovering from the flu, which we caught in Ireland. Anyway, while we were away, I stitched a piece that I showed you previously, so I'm just going to go over that before I do anything else, because it illustrates quite a few hand stitching points. So I'll just move the camera down. So here's the piece that I'm just going to illustrate some points with. I'm afraid I can't have the camera on the tripod for this. I've got to have it in my hand, so I hope it's not too jerky. As you can see, it's quite a textured piece, and it's the piece that I used a lot of pre-felts on this one. And I did quite a bit of sewing machine stitching on it, and then I've done rather a lot of hand stitching. So I'm showing you this so that you can bear in mind what you want to do when you start stitching, because you might only want to have minimal stitch, but with this I've put quite a lot in. So I've got a lot of running stitch here and some little French knots here. Now I did some stitching round here which I'm not altogether thrilled with, but it works from a distance perhaps. It's a beautiful day outside today, so anyway we've got the opposite problem. I'm always talking about the light, but it's really bright outside now, and so perhaps this might look a little bit washed out. Here are some deliberately fairly crude running stitches which I've put on to kind of make a highlight really. You can see here that they follow this line of this petal, for want of a better word. So sometimes I outline the things, and other times I actually stitch on the pieces that the areas that I've added. Of course, this one used a lot of pre-felt, so it's going to be slightly different than the one I'm going to kind of stitch along with the video. I have put some little veins, I suppose, on these leaves, which are actually quite a rich red and are looking rather washed out. There's never an easy way, is there? Now, it depends how much stitching you want to do, really, doesn't it, for this? Because sometimes I was away and I didn't have any other pieces, so I kind of got a bit carried away, stitching when my husband was busy and we weren't going for a walk, just in the off times on holiday. And my friend was reading and she was sitting in a chair, and then suddenly I'd pick this up and I'd look at it, and because she doesn't do this kind of thing, she said, "What are you doing now? What are you looking at it for?" And I said, "Well, I'm holding it away from my face so that I can work out, where I want to do some more stitching." So that's what you really need to do. You play it by ear. You do it, you look at it and you decide where you want the stitching to be. And don't be afraid to do some stitching that doesn't work. I mean, on some of these areas, I actually took the stitching out. So, it doesn't have to be, well, as they say, written in stone, but, you can stitch and then you can pull it out again. So it depends whether you want yours just to be a little bit stitched or a lot stitched. This is a lot stitched. Talking of a little bit stitched, this one is just a little bit stitched. As you can see, I did quite a lot of machining on this one. I had quite a bit of fun stitching around those white bits with the yellow thread. I hope you can see that. But it doesn't, you've seen it before, I know, but it doesn't have a lot of hand stitch on it, just a few French knots and a little area here that just gives it a bit of depth. I don't know why we have a little round bit of white on it there, but take it off. So this is just a very different feel, just a few bits of hand stitching. See, round here, I rather like doing these little circles here. Before I start stitching, I thought I'd show some threads. Now, I have been using anchor embroidery threads, and for some reason I was rooting in a drawer for something, and I came across these threads which I'd completely forgotten I owned, and obviously, as you can see, they've been used and used and used. Lots, in very small quantities, and they're hand-dyed threads from Steph Francis, who's an English supplier. Where did I just see the name? There it is. I think £1.50 is rather out of date. I've had these a really long time, and I did a whole lot of pieces of work using these threads, and they're absolutely lovely. And what's nice about them is that they're so fine. and you can do these tiny little stitches, like quilting stitches really, if you want to. Now, along with those threads in the same bag I found, those are fine cottons, and these are called mercerized cotton, and they're also by Steph Francis. So those kind of things are rather nice to use on this felt because they're not too thick. So for hand stitching, they're absolutely great. Now here I have a mixture of Steph Francis and Oliver Twist's machine cottons. But they're just as good, really. It's just that they're wound on a spool. This one is a Steph Francis one, and I like the variegated ones because then you get the different tones and the different shades as you use them. And you can control it if you're careful, or you can just use them randomly. These are some more that I got. I'll just put them all together to show you because I did a whole lot of pieces. Based on a place in Ireland, actually, with a lot of Celtic crosses, and I use these colours. They're ever so subtle, just tiny shaded greens, and when I say tiny, I mean a tiny difference in shades, greens and beiges and what have you, and they're very pretty to use. And some of these, I don't think I would use these on the felt now, but they were rather nice to lay on and couch on, and I mean, you might want to do that. Up until I've recently rediscovered these threads, I've been using a lot of just anchor embroidery thread, well, Madeira and anchor, Coats anchor threads. I'm sure these are very familiar to a lot of people, and they're very useful. Stranded cotton, I tend to just use one strand, so I now have a fantastic array of beautiful colours that I can use for my hand stitching. So without further ado, so this is the piece that I prepared before we went away, that we had the machining in the last lesson. Now, it's very flat compared to the other piece, so you're going to have to create some areas that you want to have as an accent, really. And I've threaded some dark grey thread, and I'm just going to decide where I'm going to put some solid-ish sort of stitching to give it a bit of contrast. Now, you might not want to do that. You might just want to make yours just a light feel to it. But really, it's a question of how you decide you want your piece to look. So I'm going to make it a bit more contrasty, I hope. So I've threaded the thread, as I said. I'm just going to find an area where I might want to stitch a dark line just to give it some impact. So let's say, I think that's quite a strong focal point there. So I'm just going to have a little stitch. I'm going to start on the back here, and I'm just going to outline these yellow areas with a heavyish back stitch, just to give them some, just to give them an accent. It's very much a case of personal preference. So I don't know if you can see what I'm doing here exactly. Perhaps this grey isn't dark enough. I'm not sure if it is really, but that doesn't matter because I can always go around again. So I'm thickening up this dark line that I stitched on the sewing machine just to give it a bit of impact. Now on some of them I've just done sort of quilting stitches in the gaps, but I think with this one I'm just going to do outlining to start with. Now obviously I spend anything upwards of 4 hours on hand stitching pieces, so I can't do a 4-hour video really, can I? So I'm just going to have to just show you how I get started, I suppose, and then perhaps some photographs as it progresses. I've had a look on the Flickr pages, and well, some of you look like you're up to this already. I've only looked on my phone because we've been on holiday. I haven't had a computer with me. In fact, I haven't seen my computer for a fortnight, so I'm really hoping when it comes back it's all singing, all dancing. Oh, but if you're watching this, then obviously I will have it back. But at the moment, I'm just hoping. So I've just gone around the top there, around the side and the top, and you can see that from a distance that has given it a bit more depth. If you pull the stitches quite tightly, oops, if you pull the stitches quite tightly, you do get some kind of slightly more three-dimensional feel to it, because you're pulling the line around the felt, and the felt is standing up. So it's just a sort of back stitch, really. I don't worry too much about you know, real embroidery stitches on these, because they are really only to accentuate the design and add a decorative element. So, you know, it's up to you. Stitches can be anything. I mean, many of mine are just straight stitches. I do like French knots, though, as you can probably tell. So, all the way around. And then we can just have a little look. I do spend a lot of time just looking. And as I say, if I don't like something, I just pull it out. Oh, try and stitch the fabric, not your fingers. So there we are. Now, I don't know if you can see that that now has a much stronger presence than it had before. If I lay it down, you'll be able to see it's actually bubbled up a little bit, which I quite like. Now, while I've got the black thread in, I might outline this area here on the inside of that yellow shape. It isn't black, it's dark grey, sorry, I beg your pardon. I'm sure this is common sense to a lot of people, but it's just making those choices, those decisions, and you have to do that for yourselves, really. It's not a kit, and it's not a do this exactly like mine. There wouldn't be much point in that, would there? I'm just showing you what I do. I had a wonderful time in Ireland. It was only the last day, really, that I started to feel ill. I have to tell you that when I was on the boat coming home, I just wanted to lie down and die. I'm always reluctant to call a cold a flu, but I really feel that this was a kind of flu. And I've since learnt that some of the other people that we met in Ireland have also gone home with it. One to Shetland, and one to the USA, so it's spread far and wide. So who knows, by this time one of you may have got the same bug that I have had. And my poor husband, well, he was a day behind me with his recovery. So at least he got us home in the car. And Ireland itself was beautiful, but we didn't get one day without rain, which is very unusual for that week that we have. We've never really been bothered with the rain before. And I'm just going to turn over and slide this underneath the edge. I don't fuss too much about the back, I have to say. So if some, oh, in fact you can see that there, can't you, with that big long length? I'll just chop that off. You know, if the back isn't beautiful, well, who cares? I'm only looking at the front. It's not a dressing table set or a handkerchief, so you can do what you like with the back. So I've now got a slightly darker area here, and I would probably go and pick out a few more areas over the piece that I would give the same treatment to, and then go back and put some smaller details in. But just for now, I think I'm just going to work on that area there, and then you can see what I mean. So I think I've got this on a wobbly board so that you can see it near too. So I think I might add some colour now into those areas there. I might put some contrasty French knots in. I tend to have 2 or 3 pieces on the go at once, and then I just keep going back and forth to different ones, which I recommend. It's a little bit shaky, so you have to forgive me. One good thing about not being too well is that I have lost a little bit of weight. Probably all the calories burned up coughing. Oh, needle threading, not a spectator sport, is it really? Again, there we go. Now this is one of these fine cottons from Steph Francis, and I think as a contrast to that very dark bit that I just put in, I think I might just outline this central area here of this sort of what you might call a flower with the back stitch in this very pale subtle green and yellow. So I'm going over the machine stitching as I've already done, and I'm just doing a little back stitch. I'm not actually going over the machining, as a matter of fact. I'm just inside it. I don't know if you can see that, so that the machine stitching is still visible. And I'm pulling quite tightly so that these stitches bury themselves right into the felt, so they're just glimpsed really. Oops, sorry about that. This would be something I wouldn't be doing in my sewing room ordinarily. I would be sitting with it on my knee in a nice relaxing position. But this is a good place for making films because it's quiet. So now there we are. And I don't even worry about the length of the stitches, to be honest. It doesn't bother me. I don't conform really to any sorts of approved stitches. French knots are pretty, so I'll probably do those in the correct way. But I'm not up to that yet. I don't think I'd finished this, had I, when I finished the video last time. I stitched quite a lot of it on the film, but I don't think I'd stitched all of it. I should have really said what I'd done. As you can see, in some areas I've done lots of lines because I like echoing the shapes. So now I've gone round there, and I think I'm going to put just say in this corner here. It's not a corner, is it? Just a little area. I think I've got my thread too long. Do beware of that, because it's very tempting to put a long bit of thread in, isn't it? So you don't have to keep threading your needle again, but then you do get tangled easily if you're not careful. So just doing some little French knots here into this corner of this sort of rose-like structure. They're usually best if you do them in odd numbers. They're very they're easy to do, and I have read in some books that you're only supposed to go around your needle once, but I rather like going around twice, because you do get a lovely little intriguing little coil to look into. And sometimes if you leave them a little bit loose as well, they're rather nice. Not very, but just a little. It's quite hard to stitch right up in the air like this. You need your hand. Oh no, that one's only got one curl in it. But maybe you could do some slightly smaller. Oh, and the last one, of course, is a complete mess and tangled and everything. But as I'm always saying, it's quite good to see other people's mistakes, isn't it? Right. pull that through. Well, that wasn't a success, was it? I'm going to do another one on top of that because I haven't caught the loop properly through. Let's just catch that loop down there. Right, so we have a pretty little area now with a bit of hand stitching that's accentuated the outside edge and given us some definition on the inside and some French knots.